Hello, you, and welcome to eSpace, the entrepreneurship space here at the University of Geneva during the Global Entrepreneurship Week 2020. In a few minutes, we will go for a masterclass on the topic of forging your category of one, a masterclass which will be given by Utkarsh Amitabh. He is the founder of Network Capital, a writer for Harvard Business Review, also a traveling fellow and a global shaper. This session will be also co-hosted by the Global Shapers community and especially the Geneva Hub. So as you know now, we are opening a day on the topic of the future of work. So we really hope that this entire day will give better perspective on how the world of work is today and how it will evolve in the future. I think it's time now to move to the masterclass. Utkarsh, thank you a lot for being with us. The floor is yours.
It's my pleasure to be here. Geneva is a very special city for me. I've made wonderful friends here. It's an amalgamation of multiple cultures. And Lake Geneva is absolutely a delight. So thrilled to be here, thrilled to share a perspective on category of one. Before I begin, let me give you some more flavor into how this topic became dear to me. So a couple of months back, I wrote an article at the Harvard Business Review called How to Build Your Category of One. And there, essentially, I start the article by quoting legendary investor and entrepreneur Peter Thiel, who says, "Competition is for losers." And quoting Leo Tolstoy, he says that, just like Tolstoy said in Anna Karenina, that all happy families are alike, all unhappy families are unhappy in their own special way. And extrapolating that to business, he said, all happy businesses are alike, and all unhappy businesses are, united in the way that they cannot escape competition. So essentially, if competition is for losers, how might we extend that to the world of business? So I run a company called Network Capital. Think of it like Netflix for careers. So the vision of that company is essentially to help students and young professionals transcend competition and help them build their category of one. And I think this category of one is especially important when you think of future of work, future of careers. How might you make sense of your jobs of tomorrow? Because, being a millennial today is hard work. You get advice from everywhere. Just turn on social media for 5 minutes and somebody will ask you to follow your passion. Other one will ask you to disrupt technology, learn AI. Somebody will talk about, complex terms. So we have to do all of that, make an impact, be happy, and figure out a way to deal with all the changes that are happening in front of us. The biggest challenge is that we're all essentially trying to play what Professor James Cars called finite games. So when we think about our careers, when we think about our work, from the beginning, we've been told that there is a fixed prize. We all need to compete for that fixed prize, that elite job, that elite university, that elite scholarship. And if we don't get that, our life is over and we cannot make sense of it. So finite games are defined by fixed rules and fixed outcomes. But we're living in the middle of a pandemic. My coming here was a bit of an adventure. 5 minutes before boarding the flight, I had no idea whether I was able to going to be able to make it or not. So the 21st century and finite games do not work. And unfortunately, most colleges, universities, corporations are making employees and students play and compete finite games. We revere competition. For us, the person who wins the competition is the ultimate winner of all the accolades, respect, and what have you. But essentially, even if you win the rat race, you still remain a rat. Now, I'm not calling anybody anything. I'm just saying that this 21st century and the finite game mindset does not make sense when we think of our careers. And you might think that, somebody, of my background, it's very easy for me to, come and say that, one should not perhaps play the finite games and one should look beyond. But I am today here to make a case that whether you're a baker in Paris or you're a deep tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, it makes sense for you to invest all your time in transcending competition, creating your category of one, and adopting an infinite mindset as you think about your career. So, what is the infinite mindset? The infinite mindset is just the opposite of everything that I described a couple of minutes ago. In the infinite game or the infinite mindset, the whole purpose is to keep playing. We're not trying to beat anybody. We're not trying to win. We know that the rules are going to change. We know that disruption is going to be not just a buzzword that is flying around on social media every now and then, but an intrinsic part of our daily lives. So just the current time, it's a great example of trying to figure out how might we adapt the infinite game or the infinite mindset to make sense of the current pandemic and deal with things. So in order to build a category of one of the first things that all of you listeners must do is to really define what infinite mindset you want to inculcate on a daily basis and how might you help others to do the same. In the current pandemic, the numbers keep growing, but as per my research, around 450 million people lost their jobs. These jobs are not coming back in the short term, at least not in the way we knew of it. Many jobs that were institutional or belong to corporations or public service enterprises, these jobs are being reduced. So how might young professionals and students think about their career? The answer is again infinite mindset. The challenge with infinite mindset is that many of our leaders of the world or many of our leaders of business often play lip service to infinite mindset while they still keep playing the finite game. So let me make you understand the finite and infinite mindset with simple examples. We will be number one. So the same leader who's saying that, the purpose is the play is also saying we will number one, we will beat the competition, we will overcome this, which is all fine. But if the rules are changing, do you really want to compete with your past self or do you want to compete with a hypothetical competition? Competing with somebody is exhausting, but also the finite mindset and the infinite mindset are not fundamentally disparate things. There are some jobs that many of us have to do where you have to combine both the finite mindset and the infinite mindset, but they are not as different as you see. As long as you remember, the only person that you need to compete with is yourself. And the rules that you're going to play in are going to be ever evolving. So with this said, let me give you some practical tips about how might you create such a mindset for yourself and build your category of one. I am really inspired by the emergence of what I like to call the purpose economy. Let me tell you how I came up with this term. So Andreessen Horowitz, a venture capital firm, one of the writers, investors there, started talking about passion economy. At the same time, another writer, Adam Davidson, started talking about the emergence of passion economy. So what is the passion economy? Simply put, passion economy is the opposite of what we call the Uber for X model. Remember, there was a time a couple of years ago when wherever you go in any business plan competition or any pitch that you send in, everything was Uber for X, something for X. Even I introduced network capital as Netflix for X, but I'll tell you it's much more. But the thesis is that this gig economy kind of work, which places a lot of emphasis on standardizing, on putting the fixtures and defined by, a lot of what you call operational efficiencies, is being changed by what they call the passion economy, and I've put a spin on it to call it the purpose economy. If you look at just the host of this event, the Global Shapers, the University of Geneva, and all the other sponsors and partners, the one thing that's common among at least the communities and youth networks that I've been part of and helped shape is that, at least for millennials and young professionals, there is a big pull from inside to do something that actually makes a difference. So this purpose economy is the economy where job just doesn't mean a way for you to, get an income, make a buck, but to really find transcendence within what you do. So this purpose economy is something that really energizes me as I think of the category of one. So what is going to happen? Let me give you an example from somebody on Network Capital who actually lost the job in the middle of a pandemic. So she used to work in a large financial services company, and this particular person, got fired without much notice. And surprisingly, she wasn't shaken aback or taken aback too much after 6 or 7 days. The reason was that there was something within her that she always wanted to do. Do you want to know what that is? She always wanted to bake and sell cakes. So a large financial services ex-banker who wanted to bake and sell cakes finally had the opportunity to do so. So instead of sort of standardizing the recipe for cakes, this was an opportunity for her to really create the cakes and bake the cakes that she wanted and use the modern tools of e-commerce, social media, and whatever to create a viable business model for herself. So when you think of people like her, who used to be in a very different sector, a very different industry, playing finite games, now entering the purpose economy or the passion economy space, the goal of this economy is to create categories of one. I don't think she decided to bake a cake and pursue it just as a hobby. Now this is her mainstream job. This is what she does. And for her to excel, she'll have to basically figure out how to get, say, a large number of people to take a leap of faith in her. And her goal cannot be, I have to become the number one baker in the world. Her goal has to be, how do I become better than my past self every single day? And at least for the 3 or 4 months that I've known her, that is what has been happening. She was featured by one of the most prominent entrepreneurial magazine, because this is fascinating, right? For it makes for a great magazine story. Ex-banker gets fired, starts a bakery, sells thousands of cakes. And by the way, the cakes are delicious and it has become an Instagram sensation. Now, this is not just a gimmick. Let me give you another example of Vicky Benison. She studied zoology in her undergrad, then got her MBA at University of Bath, and today is known as the famous creator behind the YouTube channel Pasta Grannies. And when you look at Pasta Grannies, it's essentially a media company built out of YouTube where Italian grandmas put together their old traditional recipes and share it with the world. So doing so has essentially just revitalized Vicky and the way she thinks about her job, a former zoology MBA turned YouTube entrepreneur. But it has also created a huge set of micro entrepreneurs in the form of those grandmas in Italy. I've had the pleasure of having some of their pastas, and in the Corona era, I myself have become a micro chef at home. So these recipes, these experimentations have created a different kind of a movement. And this is something that really energizes me. Whether you look at these Italian grandmas, whether you think of Vicky Benison, whether you think of this network capital community member who got fired and started a bakery that has now become an internet sensation, what's uniting all of them? It's the infinite mindset and their quest to transcend competing with others and building their category of one. A useful tip when you think about building your category of one is to try and think of the first 1,000 consumers or customers that you have. Often digital media is confusing and filled with information that may or may not be true, which is, I don't think that any of the examples that I presented were designed keeping in mind what will become the next Google or what will become the next Facebook. Although I'm here to make a case, even if that's your goal, one of the first things you need to do is to find 1,000 people and figure out a way to win their trust enough so that they consider paying you a small amount of subscription, a small royalty, or a regular chain of income. When I called Network Capital the Netflix for careers, it's far more than that. We combine community, career, and content and career intelligence. Community, content, and career intelligence combined is Network Capital. But Netflix for careers essentially is a nice tagline which helps people understand what it is. So what was my philosophy? How do I get 1,000 community members who had taken a leap of faith on me and the vision to subscribe and join our mission of democratizing inspiration? My goal is not to become, the next anything. I want to be the first and only network capital that does its job to the best of its ability. Because you know what? Doing this is super energizing. I wake up every day excited to go to work. And when you get 1,000 paying subscribers, you're also financially stable. The reason I called it the purpose economy is because when you think of millennials, our generation or Gen Z, we care a lot more about purpose than our predecessors. We want to make a difference, and we also want to have a decent, dignified lifestyle, but it is a combination of both. I have rarely come across a shaper or a network capital community member or any youth community member who says that the only goal I have is to make money and buy yachts. I'm yet to meet such a person. Why? Because we think differently and we want different things, but we're also being flooded with confusing career advice from all walks of life, and we need to address that head on. So the first micro step, 1,000 true fans. Just try and focus on them. Scale will be a byproduct. This is a concept that has been written extensively by Wired co-founder Kevin Kelly that I talk about in my book, The Seductive Illusion of Hard Work, my Harvard Business Review articles, my Mint articles, so forth, because it has been something that has helped shape the founding pillars of network capital. I used to be at Microsoft doing a very interesting job until quite recently. The reason I was able to take the leap of faith into network capital was precisely because of those 1,000 true fans who trusted and made this possible. It took network capital far less time to get to the 1,000 paying subscriber mark, and today it keeps growing. But beyond the growth, what really gives me meaning, what gives me purpose, is trying to really see how I can uniquely contribute to the 1,000 people who've taken a leap of faith. And, in a way, embarked on this collective mission of creating their own categories of one. It's a very different mindset. It's something that makes you far more in control of your future than anything else. Daniel Pink, a writer, talks about the 3 elements of meaningful work. And I think these 3 elements of meaningful work will help you make sense of the examples that I've presented in terms of the finite and infinite mindset, and also think of the 1,000 true fans in a different way. So he says that when we think about the purpose economy or other things, the elements of work would be autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These three, when combined, create meaningful work for people. And as I mentioned, all of us are seeking for meaning, not just jobs that pay the bill. Meanings and job that pays the bill do not need to be opposed to each other, which is why the purpose economy is blossoming. So, what is autonomy? Autonomy is essentially being able to dictate, at least to a reasonable percentage, how would you shape your day. If you're essentially enslaved to the clock, according to many philosophers, you're not really free. You are chained, you're enslaved to something else. The second element of Pink's framework is mastery. A lot of joy, a lot of meaning comes from essentially mastering your core craft. But in the 21st century, it's really challenging to figure out what to master. Today, there is a hot new topic here and a hot new trend there. Day after, there will be something new. And the week after, it will be forgotten, and there will be some new trend that everybody will be tweeting about. Again, confusing to be a millennial, right? But mastery comes from essentially honing your skill and really doubling down in a way that you can see progress. Enough psychologists have studied and analyzed what gives people the feeling of what energizes them. So, one of the biggest motivators is actually making progress on your past self. So, when you think of mastery, you need to know what to master. And that is why I think follow your passion is a confusing career advice. That is why I use the word passion economy differently. I call it the purpose economy. So, what's the problem with the phrase follow your passion? The challenge with follow your passion is that it assumes that everybody knows their passion. And I can assure you, as an engineer who studied liberal arts and got an MBA and then became a Shivning Fellow at Oxford, who worked at Microsoft, now runs Network Capital, passions change. Oh, by the way, I love to do act. I do some movies and have done theater. Lots of it, still do. So is a passion fixed? Is it finite? No, it's not. It evolves and it changes and it's completely okay. But I find great joy in mastering skills that mean a lot to me. So how am I doing it? And what's my suggestion as a peer that you might consider? Don't follow your passion, follow your curiosity. I set up Network Capital because I was really interested in how and why people make career choices. Why does everyone in India want to study engineering as a first degree? I studied engineering as well. That's completely fine. But why? What's causing it? Is it an insurance policy? Is it something that's designed to get you a certain kind of a standardized job, which will make you compete very hard in the finite game or the finite mindset? Is it something else? So I was curious of this question, and then I started tinkering around with the solution. Have I arrived? Have I solved the jobs and careers and work problem? Of course not. But I'm having a wonderful time trying to tinker away and have built a stable revenue stream, which is really important, which has removed the insecurity and anxiety out of the equation. Similarly, when you look at my writing or theater, these were not fixed passions that I had. These were some things that evolved over a period of time. And what is interesting about mastery as an element of work is that the better we get at a particular craft, the more passionate we became. So I started writing by essentially writing a little bit of blogs, my papers, so on and so forth. They started becoming popular. Do you know how I got my first book? I wrote a blog for the World Economic Forum. It became really popular. A large Indian newspaper contacted me after that blog saying that, would you like to write a column for us? I said, sure, why not? So the column became a weekly column, and then a publisher reached out to me saying that, hey, would you like to convert this column into a book? I said, sure. And then the book became a bestseller. But what I realized in this mastery equation was that the better writing I did, the more I enjoyed because I was following my curiosity. I was not feeling a sense of pressure that I need to do it because, I need to become the number one writer in the world. No. If you don't enjoy the process, if you're not really in the infinite game mindset, it'll be very difficult for you to do something for the long term. So when you think of mastery, think very carefully about which problem needs you the most, which people need you the most. How might you work together to create something unique, to find 1,000 people? That's a healthy start. If you do the math, 1,000 people who are paying you on a monthly basis, that's a very healthy revenue for most kinds of lifestyles. And the good thing about the number 1,000 is that it doesn't stop at that. But to get to the number 1,000, you need to be able to master your craft or set of crafts. And for that, you need to follow your curiosity, not your passion. So please try and keep these frameworks in mind just as one reference point. Feel free to customize them the way you deem appropriate, because that will be required for you to make sense of this really confusing set of worlds that we live in. But I promise you, from my example and from the 100,000 members that we have on Network Capital, that this framework works because it is not built on the 100,000 people competing with each other. It is built on the 100,000 people collaborating with each other and helping each other build their category of one. The last element of Pink's framework is purpose. And I think that should be self-explanatory because our generation is by definition trying to be purposeful. Just ask any millennial, what does he or she really want to do? And you will get, at least from their answers or what they're alluding to, that they want to solve a problem. It's just that they haven't figured out the tools, or they sometimes feel that everything needs to be in a sequence first. Get your degrees, get insurance policies, work, get financial security, then try and think about purpose. And I'm here to challenge a different kind of a work style in the 21st century where all these things don't need to be sequential. You might think that in my career per se, engineering, INSEAD MBA, Oxford University Chevening Fellowship, Microsoft, Harvard Business Review books, all of them have been sequential. But I am very much you. You and I, or the people I think most people who are tuning in, are essentially, we are all peers trying to figure it out. While it might look sequential, the process of trying to think about Network Capital started much before. It started the day I became curious about the problem and in my head developed a kind of a tangible vision. What might a world look like where people actually pursued jobs that they cared about instead of trying to apply for any and all jobs that come to university and forget about whether the jobs should exist or not in the first place, whether we create our own jobs. So I want you to think about all your work pursuits in terms of this framework and the infinite mindset, and I think it's going to be monumentally useful. The second thing that I'd like to talk about in this masterclass, especially in trying to make it very actionable and tangible for all of you, is for you to think of your category as of one as something that you need to build as a superpower. So remember I asked you a few minutes back, what's something that you're uniquely good at? There's a beautiful Japanese phrase, which is, again, the center of Network Capital's philosophy. I would love for all of you to explore this phrase called ikigai. So ikigai, very simply put, is a way of trying to figure out the job which is at the intersection of who you are, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And when you look at the intersection, that ikigai should be, by definition, your category of one. And when you think of, building your ikigai, one secret technique that I would like to share with you is that combine skills. there is a lot of magic in combining different kinds of skills or contra-disciplinary skills. In my case, for example, one of the things that worked very well or work very well in the network capital's evolution was I, as a person, I am decently technical. I have a strong management background. I write decently well, and I'm able to communicate complex ideas, hopefully in clear fashion. Tell me if that's not the case. By combining different kinds of skills, at that intersection, you take the first step towards reaching your ikigai. So when I say of combining different skills, I mean very different kinds of skills. Think of physics and poetry, math and music, theater and technology. Because what happens at intersections is pure magic. Think of the company, like Microsoft or Apple, let's say, for example. Apple, they said, is a better tech company than any fashion company and a better fashion company than any tech company. This is an analysis, I'm quoting someone. You try and use this Apple framework in trying to see what kind of skills can you combine and create your own category of one. Are you a data scientist who's also a stand-up comic? Are you a trader and also a musician? When you look at the intersection, it also helps you discover your inner repository of knowledge. I found not this process to not just be fun and inspiring and interesting, but also a very useful problem-solving tool. In this purpose economy and in this collective pursuit of trying to transcend competition and create your own category of one, I believe that combining skills will be a very useful technique that you can think about. So start today by asking, what are two things which seemingly different, but I can combine them to create or follow my own curiosity? There's an Italian chef called Massimo Bottura. I learnt about him from Professor Francisca Gino in Rebel Talents. And essentially, Bottura is somebody who's phenomenal in the way he's able to make experiences, design, and incredible cooking come to life. There are many Italian chefs, there are many designers, there are many experienced managers, but there is one Massimo Bottura. And that is something that you all should keep in mind. Your goal is not to become the next Massimo Bottura. Your goal is to try and figure out what will you combine to create whatever matters most to you. Bottura was most fascinated by the evolution of Italian cuisine and how might he reinvent it. And that's what he did. What will you do today? I highly encourage you to check out one of the recipes on his menu called Oops, I Dropped a Lemon Tart. If you look at traditional cooking, a lot of it comes down to following the recipes and really doing things the way it is done. So Massimo learned all of that, but added the element of improvisation, experience, and design onto it. So what was the result? Once one of his sous chefs dropped a lemon tart, and it basically fell apart. So, Oops, I Dropped a Lemon Tart is essentially a fantastic presentation of a lemon tart that has literally been smashed on a white plate. Looks gorgeous, by the way, but essentially it was a mistake. Boturo's genius was to create that mistake into an experience, into a memorable name that jumped out and stood out for everybody. And I think we can all try and learn from this. Don't we all make mistakes? Don't we all make mistakes and try to undo them? Sure. But mistakes can also be fantastic teachers in our journey to Ikigai as we try and combine different skills and try and think of this. The reason I gave you the example of Boturo, Vicky Benison, the network capital banker, became a baker and now is an Instagram sensation, who also makes more than just a living, is that these examples are very relatable. The problem with the examples that we hear about every day on Twitter is that it's actually really demotivating to some extent. A a nice quote by a gazillion-dollar entrepreneur sounds awesome for 5 minutes, but I'm far more interested in the 99.99% of people who are not that, who I hope one day become that, but don't want them to get intimidated by the prospect of such things. How do you make it more manageable, and how do you help them design such an experience that they can make this entire process come to life? The third thing I'd like to share in this category of one masterclass, and how might you create your own, is that try and build communities. I am firmly of the belief that every single company in the 21st century will be a subscription-based company. And any subscription-based company at heart is trying to be a community. But again, from your own lens, as an individual, as a young professional, as a student, when you build or try and be part of different communities, you're essentially basically learning from rapid and large-scale collaboration of minds instead of the standard competition, which is so dull and uninspiring. So the beauty of communities is that if you set the right culture, if you set the right tone, if you set the right frameworks, magic starts happening at scale. The first version of networkcapital.tv was a Facebook group. And at that time, I used to work at Microsoft full-time in a very busy job, a job that I loved. But that Facebook group, one contribution which I am happy about is that I set the culture right from the beginning. And that culture was that of radical collaboration. So when I say build or learn communities, it is essentially try and make sure that the communities that you're part of and the communities that you're building, they're designed to initiate and scale people's categories of one. Imagine if on Network Capital, I had gotten, say 1,000 or 10,000 people in the beginning, where everybody was competing all the time. How would you share anything if you are competing? It is possible, but it's not possible. I think it's not possible at scale. So on the Facebook group, I noticed from the early days itself, the way people came together, and we built some technology on top of that. But essentially, if you look at the people-to-people engagement, it was fostered because people understood intrinsically the value of playing infinite games and what they might do to learn and share with each other. So as you think of your future, think of many different communities that you can be a part of and learn from. And I like to think of a term called contribution capital, which essentially means figure out a way to add unique values to the community that you're part of. Essentially, instead, whenever we go, most people, when they go to a setting or join a community, the first thing they ask, what can I get out of it? What is my ROI, return on investment? Don't do that. Calculate your return on giving, if at all. Contribution capital is perhaps the single biggest factor that has helped Network Capital's become from a small Facebook group to one of the largest global career intelligence communities. And because we've been able to establish this as a core value, I think people are now inspired for each other. Do you know, I have not spent a single dollar on sales or marketing of Network Capital ever. It's all been word of mouth because contribution capital isn't a unique concept to me or people who are part of, X community or Y community. It is something that is fundamental to human nature. We are essentially, no matter what media tells us, essentially at the core of it, we are kind, we want to share, and we want to collaborate and build new things with an infinite mindset. Unfortunately, what media picks up are exceptions, not the rules, and more gruesome stories, not the norm. If you want to learn more about it, you can read Factfulness by Hans Rosling, you can learn Humankind by Rutger Bregman, Steven Pinker has done some work on it. But essentially, ask your grandma or your granddad. Or, they have seen and witnessed many acts of kindness, and they'll be able to give you an acute picture of what happens when communities come together. Now, the challenge when you are thinking about being a part of communities and trying to build one is this concept which I like to call intimacy at scale. So all of us are humans, and humans are designed to essentially know 150 people properly. It's called the Dunbar number. But what I'd like to suggest or invite you to do is to don't think in terms of scale again. Try and think of what are the groups of 5 that you can be a part of, just to begin with. Because I want this masterclass to be really actionable. So how do I scale down an experiment and make something possible for you? So you are essentially the set or the amalgamation of 5 people you spend most of your time with. And if a lot of building category of 1 is building and learning from communities, just try and start with communities of 5. What are the communities or micro communities that can start with 5 that you can be a part of that can help you learn and scale? That can help you contribute uniquely to others, and that can help you figure out and find autonomy, mastery, and purpose as you do so. Most importantly, help you transcend competition. Whenever you form those groups of 5, don't try and beat anybody, become better than X. You're bigger than that. But how might you think about their entire landscape? And just to wrap it all together and to make it actionable for all of you in terms of this miasma of information and frameworks that we've discussed in our category of 1. Look, one of the most defining aspects of the 21st century would be the constant change. We will have to reinvent ourselves multiple times. Disruption is far easier said than done. But what happens with disruption as and when it happens is that we need to reinvent ourselves, and in the 21st century, we will need to reinvent ourselves multiple times. The banker will need to become a baker, and the baker might need to become a writer, and the writer might need to take to YouTube, and the YouTuber might need to create a new media company to redefine how social media works. That may not work, and then you might need to start something new. So you will have to reinvent yourself multiple times, and you can't reinvent yourself alone. You need the support, the strength, the grit, the resilience that comes from truly enjoying the problem that you're solving and you're uniquely suited to solve. And that can only happen when you do that with the help of communities, when you transcend competition, and when you see this philosophy as a way of life, not just a way of finding a job or a living, but something deeper. It will not only help you be energized by the changes, it'll help you find opportunities, unexplored opportunities where people find adversity and challenges. I look up to all of you to look at the adversity that we find ourselves in, where literally nothing is defined, literally nothing is fixed. And how might you adopt an infinite mindset to create a category of 1 and transform this adversity into a unique opportunity, not only for yourself, but also for the millions who need it far more than you. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Utkarsh, for this wonderful masterclass that has been also very enlightening. Also to me, actually. I've been listening here passively and really enjoying every single bit of it.
Thank you, it means a lot.
Just a quick question to get started also. So you say this category of 1, right? I can imagine, as you've been also pursuing this direction now for quite some time, don't you find the whole process a bit lonely at sometimes?
Absolutely. Which is why I said communities are so important. it's reinvention, trying to recreate yourself. The sheer shame, for example, of getting fired or not knowing what will happen tomorrow or not being able to pay your rent or sometimes struggling to pay for an ailing relative who's been, say, hospitalized due to the current fight. It's really difficult. Um, which is why you need to build and draw strength from communities, because you are never alone. Even when in the darkest day, there are others who are going through something very similar, and you can learn from their experience. We formed subgroups in Network Capital for COVID, people who lost their jobs, people who were trying to help each other. And what I noticed on Global Shapers community, other Network Capital subgroups, and many other youth-based contribution capital-centric networks was that people understood the loneliness, the difficulty that comes with it, but sometimes didn't have the tools and the techniques to create the category of one. So I will not deny your question. It's lonely, it's hard, but it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Okay. And in some also other way, so you mentioned also this category of one, and we've just mentioned also in some ways the loneliness. But I can also imagine that people might be frightened about the idea of, pursuing their creativity
Yeah.
in these many ways actually.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of people that were called to be an ovni, right? Recruiters, for example, in company will say, well, I don't understand your profile. You've been doing X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
at the same time. Who are you?
Yeah.
So what would be your answer to this?
I hear you. I agree with you as well. So in the masterclass, when I talked about people paying lip service to the infinite mindset, is exactly this. What is the standard interviewer question? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 15 years? How did you decide to do this? What's your long-term plan? I mean, all of this is assuming that the world will be same in 5 years as it is now. Who predicted in 2015 that 2020 will be like this? Nobody. Zero. The future is uncertain, and the sooner recruiters realize that and start hiring people for jobs which are curiosity-centric, contribution capital-centric, category of one-centric, the better it will be not only for them, but for everybody. And I think for the smartest recruiters, the people who really want to attract the absolute best, this philosophy is not going to work for too long. That I will hire standardized people who do standardized jobs, who think in a standardized way. Oh, but I want them to do really innovative work to change the world. That's not going to happen. Somewhere you need to be logical and put your money where the mouth is. If you really say, if your tagline is that we are an innovation-centric company, then hire people who combine diversity of thought, ideas, action, cultures, convictions. Don't just say lip service for it. And I think we should talk about that in a fairly open way. It's time that recruiters create a scenario which is a win-win. I think the way recruitment happens in most companies today is completely flawed. The way resume selection happens, I have no idea. I've happened to work and study at the best institutions around the world. So I have just a lot of data on what works and what doesn't work. It's a black box. And I think it doesn't need to be a black box. The whole process of that one-page CV instead of, this system is broken, this hasn't changed. The CV and the job description, for example. Have you looked at any job description recently?
No.
So job descriptions are like jobs have changed leaps and bounds in the past 100 years, but job descriptions are the same. We are looking for a diligent hard worker who's very innovation-centric. Oh, but we want 20,000 pre-qualification. Isn't that silly?
A bit.
Yes.
Some ways, huh?
Yeah, so I think the brightest people and the most curious people should not join such companies till they change their mind. And since these are most companies, so we should all collectively make this process actionable. And in terms of what's the alternative? The alternate is build your category of one, just find 1,000 people. I know that every single person in the world has it in him or her to find 1,000 people to trust their mission. If you don't find 1,000 people, keep trying. That's not intimidating, right? 1,000 people you can find. Start from there. Let that be the origin point of whatever you're doing. Scale will be a byproduct. You can't build a $1 billion company without building, a $1,000 company. And $1,000 comes from just 100 customers, 10 customers sometimes. 1,000 paying customers will be something that every single person can achieve. And I think they can have a lot of fun. Don't join recruiters who say innovation, creativity, and then, follow all these traditional broken job practices.
Okay, and so now we've been so in this also again in this situation and this idea of also scaling, and I think what you're saying is very valuable, especially now to students around us, maybe also listening, that might be into this, that might also want to create, as you say, their category of one and see which of their dreams they can pursue. But now coming to maybe scaling up also, you go from in some way from building your category of one to inviting others to join also your category of one.
Yeah.
How do you really handle this? I can imagine that this category of one in some ways is also very personal.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question. When I say category of one, I mention it as a philosophy of life. I made this talk very person and people centric because I think if I were 18, I would want to know how can I create my category of one. But this category of one is very organizational, institutional, national, and international as well. So category of one is I'm trying to be my category of one, and Network Capital, the organization, which is far more than me and far bigger than me and transcends just me as one person, is trying to help create its category of one. And it's built Network Capital so that all its 100,000 members, hopefully in the coming years, millions of members, will build their category of one because it's a way of life. I think competition, when say companies compete for this very similar outcome, is what Peter Thiel was critiquing. And when he said competition is for losers. So he said when everyone competes for a fixed pie, the pie is too small for 20 people to compete. Even if you win the race, you still remain a rat. So think of category as one as a way of life. As an individual, try and build your category of one. As an institution builder, try and make your institution try to solve a particular problem. And as somebody who's providing advice to institution, you should ask yourself, what would it take for somebody with a finite mindset or of playing finite games who believes in the virtues of competition, what will it take for them to leave this old school mindset and adopt a new one, which is far more possibility driven than anything else?
Okay, thank you a lot. And now I see that we also have some questions in the chat, so I will be asking some of them to you. So someone is asking, so what do you think about trust? How much is it and will it be crucial in the future, especially in terms of building communities?
It's impossible to build a community without establishing trust. Think of any community, right? Let's take Global Shapers, for example. I believe that among other things that Global Shapers does very well, and it tries to do really well, is that it scales trust. So when you meet another Global Shaper, there is a preset understanding that this person must bring to bear a certain set of values, must be driven by things like purpose economy, curiosity, so on and so forth. And scaling and establishing trust is hard. You need to put together a culture, you need to put a certain amount of principles around that. So when you think of whether the micro communities of 5, meta networks, mega networks, or something in between, you need to be able to scale something, a conversation or an intimacy, and take it to the next level. Trust needs to strengthen with scale. Trust cannot dilute with it. So the more members, say, Global Shapers have, trust needs to increase. And this will need some intervention in terms of principles and guidelines and framework, and some of which will be managed by the community members, which is why community is such a powerful thing. It's a peer accountability mechanism, right? So when you seek to build trust, You need to follow or let people also shape the culture and then put a framework around it so that people can basically come closer as they grow in size.
So someone in the chat says, I don't think it's a question, but that's also a message for you. May you always be happy, healthy, peaceful, and prosperous. I think that's also a positive message that they've sent in
Oh,
in
thank
the
you.
chat.
Means a lot.
And so going to a second question. So someone is asking, at what point do you think that your category of one is available as a business solution? Basically, at which point do you tell yourself, I can make money out of it?
Yeah. So let me give you a couple of examples that you can think about. So network capital, for example, I first built the community. Then I built the product, networkcapital.tv, which is a simple way you can think of it as Netflix for careers. And then I put a business model around it. So my belief is, and my personal example gives me the data points, is that you will be ready when your community is ready. Your goal is just to find 1,000 people to pay you. I adopted a very open dialogue with the community. I have always been very transparent with what works and what does not work. So the way I went about it was I started experimenting with it while I was at Microsoft, experimenting with the curiosity. I was interested in this curiosity when I was an MBA student at INSEAD. And if I ask myself, I have always been curious about this question. When I started thinking about monetizing network capital, it was because I had to make ends meet. If I had to give up a living at Microsoft, I needed to figure out a way to also build and scale the community. So it was a curiosity exploration that constantly went about. You can also do it the reverse, by the way. You can also first build a very interesting product with a business model that you know will work, and you have a firm belief in that, and then let capital come to you in the form of faith by the customers. I think you should know what works better for you. So for me, it was very important to have a stable, constantly growing revenue stream before leaving. A great job at Microsoft. I loved what I did. It was very important because I don't want to be in a situation where I am not able to figure things out and I'm experimenting when I should actually be implementing. So that's just me. I knew that. Plus, I had a $150,000 loan. My MBA. I went for an MBA very young, as 25-year-old with a $150,000 MBA loan. I couldn't have just left the job on a whim, right? So I needed to think about my financial situation as well. But it'll all come down to, when do you think you will be able to get to that 1,000 level? The journey to 1,000 is very hard. In fact, the first 1,000 are perhaps the hardest to get other people come. So I don't know whether it'll take other people 3 months, 6 months, or 3 years. But the idea is, when you get to 1,000, you will feel a lot more confident, and your future, I will never say your future is secure, because that is a wrong concept. Future is never secure. Future is uncertain, but future is fun if you adopt an infinite mindset with it. So try and figure out what mix works for you. This is what worked for me. I'm not the ultimate source of wisdom. Let's try and figure out what works for you.
Thank you a lot for this wonderful answer, very comprehensive. We have another question, and I think it's also very related to the place we're in. We're in the University of Geneva right now.
Yeah.
So how may school systems, educational institutions adapt to your vision by pushing children and students to discover the capacities and uniqueness rather than promoting a stressful norm?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I've explored and written about it extensively for the World Economic Forum. So let me give you an answer, and also the organizers can share the link, so you can just Google it. Education is where a lot of our problems start. So we live in the 21st century, driven by constant disruption, constant change from all sides. And our education system is still living in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. It's designed for the industrial era. We live in the fourth industrial era. So if you look at a classroom, most classrooms, they look a lot like factories. There is a teacher, there is a bell, there are people sitting on benches, children or young students, and like an assembly line, teachers keep going, students keep coming. I'm talking on average. University of Geneva, I'm sure, is an exceptional school, but generally, that's the norm, because education fundamentally hasn't changed, right? In education, again, basically, you are taught that you need to stand first to get the best opportunities, and you need to learn, memorize all the facts. And what about innovation? What about curiosity? I don't know too much about the Swiss education system, but I can give you a flavor of what happens in many low-income and middle-income countries, is that they're a lot more fact-based than why-based. So a question in a board exam, a standard 10 exam, was what is the speed of light till 8 significant figures? Why should anybody memorize that? It is not useful. I can Google it. Instead, a question should be, why is the speed of light measured till 8 significant figures? In university exams, you should not have questions which can be Googled. How might you really create a system where universities, the ecosystem that they exist in, and the students are solving real problems? So I think it starts by trying to, again, create your own category of one. I don't think University of Geneva should try to be the next anything. You should not, I think Geneva should not try to be the Silicon Valley, because, copying doesn't work. Copying is fundamentally against the creation of the category of one. Try and be Geneva and the best version of University of Geneva, but try and learn from some new things that are happening. So adapt to the current times and try and figure out what is a unique perspective that University of Geneva adds to Geneva and the world, without trying to be the next X or ABC of X. I think that's a philosophy that I strongly urge you to not go towards.
Thank you a lot for answering this question. I think we're going also to clip this part and really brainstorm on it to see how we can also, from our side, students also make the experience better. So
Yeah.
Utkarsh, thank you. I see that the clock has run out of time. Utkarsh, thank you a lot. Thank you for coming,
It's my pleasure.
see you soon.
See you soon. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.